Connection is a healthy and essential aspect of our daily lives. From a warm hug after a hard day to kind words just when we need them, these gentle moments give us an understanding of life's true meaning. But when the ability to connect is interrupted by the hustle of daily life and to-do lists pile up next to the worry of who needs school supplies, sometimes making decisions about our health and the well-being of our loved ones can take a back seat. When it comes to those we care for, vaccines are one of the greatest public health success stories, and along with other measures, are one way to help prevent certain diseases. At Merck, we envision communities where families, healthcare providers, local organizations, and advocates work together. Health equity happens when every person, regardless of age and ethnicity, in every community, has fair access to healthcare, including the vaccines they need. For more information, please visit whyvaccines.com.
Salah. Escape Cancelo. Oh, it's brilliant from Mo Salah. And still, Salah. Oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne. That is what Martinelli gorgeous. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, EPL Index proudly brings to you the best prediction podcast in the world, A Tad Predictable, with your host, Tiriwa Chanakira, and his guest. From Manchester via South Africa, it's Michaela.
It's game week 8, and you know what that means. It's time for another brand new episode of A Tad Predictable. We're only 7 games into the season, barely 2 months into the season, and we've already had a second international break. It's absolutely insane. But the one thing I do like about the international break in October is that it usually comes the weekend of my birthday. So it makes things a lot easier for me to plan and organize things. And obviously in saying that, we've pre-recorded this prior to obviously the last week before, the week of the game week of 19 October. So if there are any injuries between now when we're recording it, and then obviously please take that into account when you do listen to this. But I am excited to have her back on the show, Man United fan Michaela. Michaela, you made it back. I mean, how do you feel about that? And are you ready for a good show?
I am super excited to be back on here, so thanks again for having me. It's always great to speak all things Premier League and fixtures, so I'm really, really glad to be back. I wish my team was doing a lot better, but other than that, I'm really, really happy to be back and excited to see what's in store for tonight.
Yeah, unfortunately, look, at the end of the day, only one team can win the league, so the rest of us might end up disappointed with our seasons in varying degrees of disappointments, I guess. But let's move swiftly into the fixtures, because I mentioned varying degrees of disappointment, and surely the team that is kicking us off would have been very disappointed with their second half performance. I'm talking about Tottenham Hotspurs. They were up against Brighton last time out. They were comfortably 2-0 ahead, looked to be in control of the game. They end up having a collapse. I don't want to say the verb that's become synonymous with them, that obviously is part of their name. But they will be hosting West Ham in a London derby. Are you expecting a reaction from them? How did you see, I guess, the collapse in their last game as well?
I must say, when I was watching the game and I saw them go 2-0 up, I was like, wow, this is going to be an onslaught. Like they were absolutely like pummeling them. And I was like, wasn't expecting it to be that cutthroat. But obviously when the second half came on, I don't know what happened to them. It's like they went and came out in the second half thinking, it's going to be a walk in the park, and half of them were half asleep. But I definitely think because it's a derby and because obviously they gave up a 2-0 lead to lose 3-2, I definitely think they'll come back with fighting, and also obviously being an international break, so a lot of players will definitely either be well rested, but most of them will definitely be feeling the games a bit. So I think that it's going to be a tough game for Tottenham, but I think they will bounce back, to be honest, even though West Ham and themselves haven't necessarily have had a great season so far, as what we all thought they would.
Yeah, I think it's been shaky. Obviously, there's a new manager coming in, so we tend to give them a little bit of a grace period, but it seems like he's one of the managers on a shorter leash than you would expect of a new manager coming in Lopetegui. I think for West Ham, they took advantage of an Ipswich side who I thought played into West Ham's hands. And I can see Spurs doing the same thing if they're not careful. I mean, for me, I think playing Bentancur, Maddison, and Kulusevski as a midfield three, I don't think is going to work a lot in the Premier League if you want to be finishing in those European or at least Champions League positions, because it just exposes you in midfield. Bentancur's not a
100%.
out-and-out defensive midfielder. Maddison is definitely more a 10 than a central midfielder, and Kulusevski is more a wide player or even a false 9 instead of a midfielder. So you're leaving yourself with a midfield that has really no inkling to defend or maybe even a desire to defend, dare I say, with how attacking those players are. And then you play attacking fullbacks as well. So, I mean, you got to pick a struggle. Either you play more defensive fullbacks if you want your midfield to be that attacking, or you have to change the midfield balance a little bit to at least have some defensive players out there. And I think the danger for them is it seems to be we can play all these attacking players because we've got Van der Ven, and if anything goes in behind, he can chase it down and stop it. But that just means he's going to do a ridiculous amount of sprints in games. He's going to get injured again. Like, he constantly seems to get injured in a Spurs kit. And I worry then for Van der Ven's, long-term career at the club.
No, definitely. And I mean, what definitely I think will be a positive for West Ham is they can exploit Tottenham's high line. And Tottenham's are very much an attacking style of play at the moment, especially with Postecoglou's style of play, which, like you mentioned, leaves him wide open. So I think if West Ham can capitalize on that, they could actually run away with the game, especially with obviously Kudos, who's doing really well, scoring goals. Bowen's just got back into the goals, which is great for him. They've got a really good team. And Souček also very solid midfielder who can create and help defensively when needed. I think they could easily break down that Tottenham midfield and defense, and they can't solely rely on Mickey van der Ven, like you said. But it seems like it could be a cracking match. And saying all that against Tottenham, I mean, Brendan Johnson is having a stellar season so far. I mean, he's definitely put his haters silenced them quite a lot. And Solanke, I know they paid a lot for him, but he's not looking too bad. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, and you can tell that he paid attention to what people were saying, because a lot of his celebrations are shushing the haters every time he scores. So yeah, more power to him, and hopefully he continues to do that from a Spurs perspective. I think in terms of scoreline for this game, I like the fact that you talk about it being an exciting game. Spurs are definitely going to go all-out attack, because that seems to be the only way they know how to play. I think West Ham, if they just, as soon as they win the ball back, give it to Paqueta, and he looks to play out wide to whoever's open, whether it's a Bowen, a Kudus, as you mentioned, a Michaela Antonio. I think that could work really well against Spurs. I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw. I can't separate the side. I would like to think Spurs at home edge it with their attack, but I just think their defense is so bad that they're going to have to, at some point, fight a mental game rather than just, or the Brighton game where mentally they were almost fighting ghosts, the Spurs or the ghost of Spurs past rather than necessarily playing the game itself. And that kind of made them lose their way. I could see something similar happening here leading to a 2-2, whereas ordinarily I probably would have leaned with a Spurs win. I think I'm going to stick with 2-2.
I mean, listen, I actually think that's probably a good score prediction. But I'm going for something slightly different. I know how Tottenham in recent years love a late winner. They always play terrible football and up until the last 10 minutes of the game, and they always end up either drawing or winning the game. So I'm going for a 3-2 Spurs win. I think they'll clinch it in the end. I think it's going to be a tight game with a lot of goals. But I do think they will clinch it in the end with a 3-2 win.
That will make for a very exciting start to the weekend. Let's move on to Fulham versus Aston Villa. I mean, for me, you look on paper at the Fulham Man City game and you think, okay, it was probably, Fulham gave them some issues, but Man City, their attacking prowess came up on top. But actually, I thought Fulham caused them a lot of problems. And obviously, Traore had a fair few chances to go and win the game for Fulham at some point, or at least give them the lead. And then also chances to draw them level when City were ahead. So from a Fulham perspective, I think they take a lot of confidence from that game. And then for Aston Villa, I think we're starting to now see the strain that comes with having to play midweek weekend on a Champions League level, because obviously they did it last year in European football, in Europa Leagues and stuff like that. But now it's the Champions League. Every game is important that you're playing, whether it's Premier League or Champions League. All the players obviously want to play the Champions League games, and does that take away focus from Premier League games? They've had 2 draws in their last 2 games. I don't think that's a coincidence that it's kind of when Champions League has started to ramp up.
No, definitely not. I mean, playing Champions League, Premier League, and other cup games in between tires the players out, especially like you said in Champions League. You're playing the best of the best, and you're going to put your best players out on that pitch, and that takes a lot out of any player. And 3-4 days later, you're playing a Premier League game, so it's so quick, straight after each other, and they're not necessarily used to that in a sense. So I think it's going to take their bodies a bit of a pounding. And we saw that against United. They weren't as clinical or had the worst match or more attacking that what they normally were, that as what you would see in an Aston Villa side. So I do think they are feeling it a bit. And I think this international break came at a right point in time for them, to be honest. But I mean, Fulham in themselves, they're a bit unlucky with results, and also I feel like they could be doing a lot better. But I mean, Anis Pereira has done so well for Fulham. I think he's been really good for them, and Berger, and Jimenez, he's started to get a run of form. I know he hasn't scored or anything, but he looks decent on the ball. He makes good runs and stuff. So it should be a really, really good game. But I think Aston Villa just have that quality inside them, So, I mean, the players that they have is sensational. I mean, Watkins can score a goal from any minute of the game. He's just so good in front of goal. And Tielemans creates so much, and he's so quick on the ball. So it's going to be an interesting game, But I think Aston Villa are doing very well this season, so I wouldn't put it past them to get back into the run of things of winning games.
And I'm sure their fans would be or are pleased with the fact that Duran's also signed a contract extension for them. He seemed to have started the season quite well. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to this game. I'm curious to see if any of the Aston Villa players' heads are sort of turned towards midweek action? Because once again, this is a game that comes just before a Champions League game. Whether or not they're, are they going into the 50-50 challenges, or are they a bit cautious because they don't want to get injured, for the midweek game and stuff like that? These are the type of things that they're going to have to get used to and work around in order to be successful in both competitions. But what scoreline are you predicting? I mean, they're in 5th place at the moment. It seems like I'm speaking of them like a woe is me type thing. They're in a healthy position. 4 points away from top of the league table. As I said, the 2 draws are just the things that I'm starting to get a little bit of concern from. But they've got 4 wins this season. They seem to be going along quite well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, listen, the fact that even though they played those Champions League games and they're still able to get the draws, which just shows you the quality they have within that squad. I think that I think the season's it's going to be a long season for Aston Villa, but I definitely think they have the quality and the players on the bench and off of it. So I think they're going to have I think they definitely will finish in the top 4. And I mean, I know I was a bit harsh on Fulham. I mean, Fulham are sitting 8th on the log, but I mean, I think they could do a lot better, and especially in later stages of the season, they do seem to pipe up a bit more. So it's going to be a very interesting game, but I'm going for a 2-1 Aston Villa win.
2-1 to Aston Villa. That will be music to the Aston Villa fans' ears, and they can head into sort of the Champions League game in good spirits. I think I like that scoreline. I think my concern with Fulham is the fact that they are struggling to capitalize on opportunities and take them. So I like that 2-1 scoreline. I've also got 2-1 to Aston Villa in this one. I think they grind it out. They find a way to win it. And for Fulham, it might end up being yet another game where they rue some of the missed chances that have plagued them quite a bit this season. But let's move on to our next fixture. I mentioned them a bit earlier when we were discussing West Ham. I'm talking about Ipswich. They will be hosting Everton. Now, I think Ipswich, if you watch their games, they play good football. I can see how they want to play their football. They want to play pretty football. They want to play attractive football. But sometimes you have to win ugly in the Premier League. And I think teams that are able to adapt their pretty style of play to recognize when it is the time to play ugly to get a win tend to be more successful than teams that just stick to, I want to play pretty football, unless you are like a Man City where your squad is just insane. You've got arguably the best players in every single position. You know what I mean? I don't know if an Ipswich can stay up purely by playing this style of football all the time without having some time where, okay, on this occasion, we're not going to play out from the back. Let's just do 10 minutes where when the ball comes near our box, we just clear it just so we can relieve from pressure. That type of game management, I think, is what's missing from them. Whether or not their manager believes they need that in their game, I guess time will tell. I think Southampton are a similar team in that vein where they want to play a specific style of football and are wanting to stick with it. But against an Everton side, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I think Everton, if I'm Everton, I make this game physical. I try and make this game ugly. And I'm counting on the fact that if we start punching them in the stomach, Ipswich that is, they're not going to be able to respond because they like to play this pretty football, and it's just not going to gel well against a maybe more physical, rough and tumble type of game that Everton might bring.
No, definitely. I mean, also you have the two teams that both are sitting 17th and 16th on the Premier League log, and both have a lot to prove, especially for Everton. I mean, Ipswich. The thing is with Ipswich for me is, yes, they got pummeled 4-1 by West Ham on the weekend. They still have glimpses in their game that is quite exciting. It's just getting their formation and their tactics right for me at this point in stage. I think Delap, I'm sorry if I pronounced the name wrong, but but he's in good scoring form. He scored 2 last game out against, I think it was Aston Villa. Was it Aston Villa? Anyways, he scored 2 goals last week and the weekend before, and then he scored again against West Ham. So I mean, he's in good scoring form. So they need to start capitalizing on that and getting more chances to him to try to finish them off. But I think it's going to be this the better team of who's going to win this. I think, Everton have a lot to prove. They have some good players within their squad. I mean, Calvert-Lewin, he's been not injured for a while now, which is pretty good for them on their perspective. And Ndaya also, I think he's got some quality on him. So I think it's going to be a very, very good game. And I think that it's going to be very, very, like you said, it's going to be very physical, because Everton do like to bring more physical into their game. So I think it's going to be a very interesting game, especially with Everton playing away. So it'll be very interesting to see how it goes. But I think if Everton do bring the physicality to the game, I think Ipswich could struggle.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how Ipswich adapt to this game. What scoreline are you predicting for this one?
I'm actually going to go for a 2-2 draw.
Nice. The curse of Everton continues.
Eventually they'll win something.
To be fair, yeah, they've got obviously that one win a couple of weeks back, or was it 2 weeks back? But yeah, it seems like at times they've been quite unlucky in fixtures. Obviously, I think they would have enjoyed the fact that Anthony Gordon missed the penalty against them on the weekend, and I think he ended up blocking them on Twitter or something like that.
The thing is, Everton fans have always been ruthless, especially with Rooney as well. Whenever Rooney played against Everton, they used to go all at him, scream at him, boo him, throw things at him. So once one of their own, especially coming up from the academy, leaves them, they take kind of to heart. And especially that's what Anthony Gordon kind of got the sense of, and they just got behind his head. So yeah, I can imagine that he would have blocked it.
Hey, podcast listeners. Tired of ads barging into your favorite news podcasts? Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. Stay up to date on everything newsworthy by downloading the Amazon Music app for free, or go to amazon.com/ad-free news. That's amazon.com/ad-free news to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
I'm hoping that Ipswich can pull it off. Obviously, as listeners know, I have a slight affection to them this season. But I raised my concerns earlier with regards to, I think they need to learn to win ugly at times. And until they do that, I think it makes it for a tougher season. I hope they sneak this one 1-0. It's more a hope than an analytical review of their performances and then looking at this game, previewing this game. But I'm hoping that Everton's issues in front of goal go a game longer than the Newcastle game, and then Ipswich. You mentioned Delap. It was interesting to hear Michaela talk about how Delap was injured last season, and he's basically starting to get back into the groove of things, and it's taken him a while to get back into it. So maybe he continues that form. If they can sneak a 1-0 win in this one, I think that will be great for them. But for Everton, a win here would kick off what should be a run of games where they've got nice fixtures, where they can sort of try and get some separation between themselves and the rest of the relegation zone. So yeah, a lot at stake in this game, even though it's only 8 games into the season. Speaking of a lot of stake in games, Man United at the moment, I think, I don't know your thoughts, but in terms of, is this a must-win game? I mean, it's early in the season, but is this must-win?
Yes, 100% a must-win. I mean, the top 4 are like galloping away a bit. And if United want to finish within that top four, I mean, United are sitting on 8 points and Chelsea are on 14 and have Arsenal that are on 17 and United are sitting on 8. So that they're kind of running away from it a bit. We can't afford to lose a game, but we can't afford to draw one either. I mean, we also need to start getting confidence within ourselves to actually start winning more games and get a trot going. And as early as the season is, it is kind of a must-win game, which is quite sad considering we've let it get to this point.
It makes it tough as well on the players because if you're heading into games with this much pressure, especially a home game against the Brentford side, I think first and foremost, Michaela, I think the first thing Man United have to do is win the coin toss. Because we've seen Brentford go and score goals in, 4 consecutive games within the first 5 minutes? 3 of which were in the first minute. So I think win the coin toss, pass the ball all the way back to the keeper, wait for them to come towards you, kick the ball to their end of the pitch, and hopefully that's wasted a good 2-3 minutes. At least you've survived that early Brentford onslaught. But yeah, I mean, they've been one of maybe the surprise teams of the season, and maybe they'll be one of the teams we talk about when we get to the halfway stage of the show, where we'll be sort of discussing maybe things that we thought at the start of the season and how some of those things have changed now that we are 7 games in, about to head into the 8th game week after the international break. But yeah, I think this is a potential banana skin game for Man United because they're coming into this game with all the pressure against a Brentford side who have momentum, I feel, maybe haven't been able to close out games. Those first 2 of the 3 games where they scored in the first minute, they ended up losing. The next one, they ended up drawing. It's only now against Wolves where they go and get the win. Mbeumo looks dangerous.
He does.
Carvalho seems to be getting into the groove of things as well for them. With the pressure, I'm assuming that the Avengers are going to be back in the box. I mean, I don't know if you saw at Villa Park, there was Sir Radcliffe was there, Sir Alex Ferguson was there. It felt like they had brought the Avengers to sort of assess whether or not Ten Hag is going to be in a job after the game. He ends up staying or keeping his job with the draw, but I would imagine the pressure continues to mount, and as you say, he has to keep winning in order to stay in his job.
No, 100%. I mean, listen, even speaking about it now, I wouldn't 100% say that he will have his job by the end of the international break. As painful as it is for me to admit, I think we could actually have a new manager by the time we play Brentford, to be quite honest with you, or at least an interim manager. Because I know there are people having meetings with him, and there's conversations going on behind closed doors at this present moment. So I mean, I still think Ten Hag is the man for the job. And I do think that, like you said, that vital first 3 minutes of the game against Brentford is vital for United, especially considering United love to give away such easy goals, especially so early on in the start of the game or early in the second half, where I know that Brentford can definitely capitalize on that, especially like you said, with Mbeumo being in such great form and the speed that he possesses. He can exploit our defense really bad, which is something that we've been struggling with this quite a bit this season. So it's a must-win game for United coming against a fiery Brentford who aren't afraid to throw literally anything at the game, especially attacking-wise. So it is a must-win game, and it'll be very interesting to see if Ten Hag is in charge of that game, because if he is, it'll be very interesting to see how he goes forward with this formation that we're playing at the moment, if he shapes things up or changes things about. I mean, he takes players off really early, like Rashford in the first half in the midweek game before the Premier League game. So I know there's a lot of people that aren't happy with him tactic-wise, so it'll be very interesting to see how things roll out, especially if he has this job or not.
Yeah, one to keep an eye on. I think for me that the worry for Ten Hag is maybe twofold for me. The first thing is anytime a new owner comes in, whether it's a owner that takes over completely or a co-owner like Sir Radcliffe, who's coming in and getting control of day-to-day stuff, is usually they like to appoint their guy.
Yeah.
So you're already fighting an uphill battle because they can always give the excuse of, well, we didn't hire Ten Hag. You know what I mean? And then the thing for me with him, the worry is I still don't know what Ten Hag football is meant to look like at United. And we're, 3 seasons into his tenure there, and the fact that we don't have that clear identity, I don't think is helping him at the moment. I appreciate that he's had a whole lot of injuries, but we've seen managers that have had injuries and we can still point at them and say, oh, that's a Ten Hag team, or that, that's a Klopp team, that's a Pep team, that's a even a Nuno Espirito Santo team. You can point it out. Disciplined at the back, opportunist up front. Like Ten Hag, it's still a bit of a mix. Those are the two things that concern me for this, for them long term. But in terms of this specific game, I'm going with the recipe of Ten Hag always seems to do just enough to stay in the job. So I'm going to go with a 2-1 Man United win because Ten Hag just seems to know how to pull off wins when he absolutely must.
No, 100%. He has done in the past. I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. I still want Ten Hag in. I mean, I don't necessarily always agree with his tactics personally, but I mean, I do agree with you in the sense that he doesn't have a specific style of play. And I think, I don't know if that's down to the fact that he doesn't have this exact starting 11 that he wants to play. But like you said, we still have players. He can still try to play the player style he wants. I know he loves playing from the back, so we do see a lot of that. But I mean, it's a difficult one. But I am also actually with you. I'm going for a 2-1 United win. I'm feeling optimistic, especially if he's still in it. He has a point to prove, and if he's not, generally new managers try and shape up things and make a point. So I'm going for a 2-1 United win as well.
Yeah, I think my parting words on him are that I just don't see how he stays in the job long term, because Man United as a football club, the expectation is titles. I don't think winning FA Cups or Carabao Cups is going to be enough to quell the thirst of a Champions League and a Premier League title. And eventually that's going to come to roost. Eventually they're going to want him to be delivering that, or at least challenging for those things. And if he can't deliver those, he's going to lose the job. So for me, I think it's inevitable that he does end up losing it, but maybe he can hold on to it for a little bit longer. But let's move on to Newcastle versus Brighton. I mean, another game that, I mean, it's at St. James's Park, which always makes games slightly more interesting. From my perspective, I just think the crowd brings a different atmosphere there. But what do you make of this fixture?
Well, I mean, Newcastle Brighton is going to be a fiery game. I mean, Brighton at the moment, I feel like they're doing very, very well. I mean, they're sitting 6th in the log, and Newcastle at 8th. Not much points are separating them at the moment. I mean, Newcastle's on 12 points and Brighton's on 12 as well. So it's going to be a very, very, very good game. And the fact that Newcastle was held to a goalless draw against Everton, I think they will definitely come up more fired to prove something against a Brighton that is on the in form at the moment. So I'm really looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be a really, really exciting and fun-filled game with a lot of goals and a lot of excitement.
Yeah, it's shaping up to be a good game. I think Newcastle in the Everton game definitely missed having a focal point up front, whether it's an Isak or a Callum Wilson up front. Obviously, Brighton also they have their injuries as well. We know João Pedro has been quite influential for them, and he's been out, and it seems he's going to be out until about late November. But for me, I don't think the issues for Brighton are offensively. I think they're defensively. I get worried every single time a team is running at their centre backs at pace. And if I'm looking at Newcastle's front line, that's exactly what they'll be bringing, especially if they've got an Isak back. Isak, Gordon, and let's say Harvey Barnes running at Brighton's defence, I think worries me if I'm a Brighton fan. And whether or not they can do enough going forward to quell the goals that Newcastle are going to score, because I'm definitely giving Newcastle a goal or two in this one. That's where I'm struggling now, is how much can Brighton punch back if Newcastle are scoring one or two goals at least in this game?
I mean, it's going to be very challenging, and like you said, if Isak is back, which I think he probably has like at least a 65% chance of playing, especially with the international break and everything. But if Isak's back and having Harry Barnes and Gordon, who also has something personally to prove after a really bad game against Everton, I think it's going to be a disaster class for Brighton, because I think Doug's also very slow. He's getting on now, and I think he struggles in things, and he can also be quite quick to get a hot head. And Newcastle players seem to really want to go for players like that because they have something to get into their head. So it will be definitely a great game to watch. It will be fiery, a lot will happen. And I think also having Matoma on their side as well, from Brighton's perspective, he's been sensational. I mean, I think he's one of their best players, if not their best. And also Mente back in scoring, and Welbeck. I mean, wow, he's really refound himself with his Brighton team. And I mean, I think I want to rule Brighton completely out against Newcastle. I mean, Newcastle themselves, I don't know. I think their defense is a lot more solid, but they also slip up really easily and make silly mistakes, which can cause them terrible chances. So I think it's going to be quite evenly played out, to be fair.
Yeah, it should make for a really tasty game. What score prediction have you got for this one?
I am going to go for a 2-0 win for Newcastle.
Very solid comeback. You mentioned they need a response. That would be good for them. I'm going to go 2-1 Newcastle. I think Brighton do get a goal in this one. I think Newcastle have been a bit sloppy at times in games, and Brighton should be able, from an attacking perspective, to capitalize on that. As you mentioned, Welbeck has rolled back the years. I wouldn't be surprised if he pops up with another goal in this one. But I'm still worried about Brighton's defense, and until they shore that up for me, I'm always going to be cautious of them being able to hold teams off defensively. But what we'll do now is head towards a short break, and then we'll go on to, as I mentioned earlier, some of the thoughts that we had before the season, and obviously those that have now changed and how they've changed with the 7 games that we've seen heading into the 8th one. Obviously this being in an international break period. But I would be remiss not to mention that this podcast is presented by EPLindex.com in association with our presenting sponsors, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. You guys can check out their services at libertyshield.com. You can save with the coupon code EPL25, which will get 25% off of the router or the software VPN. That software VPN downloads straight onto your devices. We thank them for sponsoring the show. It's a virtual private network that allows you to stay safe online, encrypt your internet traffic by protecting your online identity. You can hide your IP address and shield your online data from third parties. You can change your location, thus allowing you to access content from all over the world and avoid geo-blocks and government-imposed restrictions to access any website. Guys, we will be right back after this short break with some thoughts so far into the season. All right, we are back, Michaela. We are discussing thoughts that we had before the season and that have probably changed now that we're 7 games into the season. I don't know, we were roughly talking about a few before we hit the record button. Do you want to kick us off with one that maybe you had before the season and that's changed, having gone through 7 games this season?
Yeah, one that I'm definitely very surprised about that I thought would be doing a lot better now than what they are at the moment is definitely Crystal Palace. I'm so surprised that they are 18th. I mean, if you look at the squad that they have, they're a type of squad you wouldn't, when you're looking at them on paper, you wouldn't think that they'll be finishing in 17th like place at the moment. I mean, they have Eze, Nketiah, Sarr, Mitchell, and Lema, and I mean Dean Henderson in goal as well. He's a solid keeper. I'm honestly very, very surprised that they are sitting so low on the log in 18th position with only 3 points.
And I do want, I think the Glasner has recognized it because he's arranged a behind closed door game. I think it's against Ipswich during this international break. So I think he's definitely recognized things that he wants to work on. And hopefully they get that stuff sorted out this window. I wonder if maybe from a mental side of things, if there is a little bit of, I don't know if frustration's the right word, maybe disappointment within the dressing room for players like Aguehi, like an Eze, who probably could have moved this summer, were rumored to be moving this summer. Aguehi, I mean, Newcastle, there were talks about him in Newcastle throughout the whole summer window. Eze, I think Tottenham came in late for him, and maybe 1 or 2 other clubs came in late for him. I know Man United were linked with Olise, but I think Eze is another one that maybe could have come there. Is there a factor of these players thought they were getting their move, didn't get their move, and maybe their heads have been turned a little bit? They're not as invested in the project as what they would have been, at the back of last season when they were one of the informed teams.
No, 100%. I mean, I think it plays a lot on their mind, knowing the fact that there were some big clubs coming in for them. And they, whenever a player gets that sense that, some big club comes in for you, and a club, it becomes like this frustration with a club that aren't allowing you to go, and you kind of lose that desire to play for a club, especially when that happens. And I know that we were linked with Eze, and I would have gladly have taken him. So it's very interesting to see like how they're performing at the moment. I definitely think that's 100% back of their minds, especially with January transfer window looming closer. So I think that, it does become a problem because it causes issues within the backgrounds of the locker rooms as well, because they're not really playing their full heart on the pitch. So I agree with that, and it's quite sad really that it gets to that point. But at the same time, you got to think to the club, should they have just let them go? Because it's not doing them any good having players that don't want to be there and clearly are not showing that they want to be there.
Yeah, one maybe for them to think about. I don't know if they can move them in the summer, but maybe, I mean, in January, but maybe in the summer. I think one for me is the fact that it's not the promoted teams that are rooted at the bottom of the table. I think a lot of people sent Southampton, Ipswich, and Leicester straight back down the moment they got promoted. But we can see Wolves are in there. We've mentioned Crystal Palace, Everton are hovering in and around there. I'm obviously Man United are near them. That's a touchy subject with who we got on the podcast. But I'm not expecting Man United to be down there for too much longer. But there seem to be teams that I wouldn't have expected to be in the mix. A Wolves, a Crystal Palace, and Everton obviously have had issues in recent seasons. But the fact that a Wolves, for example, who I think are better than 20th, I definitely think they've played better football to probably be around 15th, 16th, in my opinion. They've just been poor decision making at times and unlucky in other situations. Would that worry you if you're a Southampton and Ipswich and Leicester to see teams like a Wolves that maybe people didn't expect to be in and around there be in and around there? Because it means if they click, probably one of us is going to end up dropping into the position that they're in at the moment. Or do you just are you just happy that there's a team that's below you and you just keep trying to accumulate as many points as possible?
I mean, I think it's a bit of both, to be fair. I think a team's going to have to think positive, saying, you know what, we're clearly doing something a lot better than what they're doing at the moment. We just need to keep the things that we're doing right, and obviously work on the things that we're not doing right and fix those things up. And I think obviously in the back of their head, they must have the fact that, you know, a team like Wolves, with the players that they have and the style of play that they do play, which is a very much attacking and fast-paced game, that they will definitely be coming back eventually. I mean, it's only a matter of time before something clicks there, even if like they bring a new manager in or whatever happens. But it's going to happen. It's inevitable. Anyways, it's going to happen, and you know, they got a quality team, and you just got to think that Wolves will definitely be picking it up. And it's kind of scary. It just shows you how close the Premier League is, especially this season, when you have a team like Wolves sitting in 20th place with the players that they have, and you can still say that they still have something to show and fight for to actually get out of that bottom three and possibly still in the middle of the table.
Yeah, one to keep an eye out on, and maybe they're just in a supernatural funk that they can't get out of, and you end up getting relegated. But from a positive perspective, and we'll then move on to the rest of the fixtures, I think just shout outs for some teams that are doing maybe a lot better than people expected. Nottingham Forest, under Nuno, they currently sit in 10th place with 10 points. I think they've been really disciplined defensively. They've only conceded 6 goals, which I believe, apart from Liverpool, no other team has conceded less goals. I know Arsenal also have only conceded 6 goals. So, I mean, if you can keep that defense going, then they could be in for a really exciting season. Fulham currently sit in 8th place. As we said, if they can start capitalizing on some of the chances that they're missing, again, what could be in this season. And then Brighton in 6th place, a new manager coming in, a young manager at that, and that seems to be the trope that anyone that talks about Brighton talk about them having a young manager. He's got more to it than that. He's been involved in coaching a lot longer than maybe the years of his age suggests. But yeah, I think those teams will be really, really happy with how they've started the season, and will be looking to capitalize on those positive starts. But as we continue with the rest of the fixtures, we head straight back down towards the bottom of the table, because it's Southampton. Obviously, they are in 19th place, sharing, you know, the points total with bottom team Wolves on 1 point. No wins yet for either team. Both have had 1 draw and 6 defeats. For Southampton, it looked promising, maybe. Certainly from a scoreline perspective against Arsenal, but for me, it seemed like Arsenal were always going to click into another gear and then go and win that game. But surely from a Southampton perspective, just from a scoreline perspective, it must have been pleasing to see them hanging on for as long as they did. And then for Leicester, I think they exploited the huge gaps that Bournemouth have between their midfield and their defense. They had players running in behind those sort of pockets. And there was space there for them to exploit. They end up winning 1-0 against a Bournemouth side that started the game slow, but then picked up and couldn't get the goal. What do you make of this one? Both promoted sides. I'm sure they'll be looking to get one over the other. Do you see Southampton finally getting their first win of the season?
I mean, the thing is, Southampton have they have some quality players. It's just that they're not seeming to, even when they played against us, it's just like they can't find that final thing. They just can't score. And that's quite frustrating to see. I still think Dublin's one of their promising players. I think he's a really good player. You know, and I think that win is definitely, results definitely coming up in the horizon for them, you know. I mean, it has to be. It's not like they're playing really bad football. I mean, when they played against Arsenal, yes, they lost 3-1. But moments of those games, I actually thought they played better game than we have seen. So it's going to be a very good game. I think also with Leicester City, I think Leicester City also sitting on the log, Leicester wouldn't be too pleased of where they are either, sitting in 15th. So they're also wanting to prove something, especially being newly promoted, like you said, with obviously Southampton. They have a lot to prove. They both do. But especially more so Leicester being dropped down so soon and then coming straight back up. I think it's going to be a very interesting game. And I think Vardy also, I wouldn't say he had his greatest game against Bournemouth, but I mean, you can never rule out Vardy. Jamie Vardy on his good day is unplayable. And also Ayew also very, very great. So I think they both will be causing, Ndidi Azol will be causing big troubles for that Southampton defense. So I think it's going to be a very challenging game, but also a very tight game. And I think that it's going to be scraps being played from both sides.
Yeah, and you mentioned Vardy. I think he's the difference in this game. I've gone 1-0 to Leicester. I think he gets the winner.
Yeah, I'm going with your score as well. I think it will be a 1-0 to Leicester. I think that, unfortunately, as much as Southampton need that win, I think that Leicester will just edge it out. And unfortunately, until Southampton sort out their scoring issues, I know they obviously got one the last game, but still, they have created so many other chances and they just don't finish them all. Until they sort that problem out, I'm going 1-0 Leicester City.
Nice. That will be back-to-back 1-0 wins for Leicester there. The team that they recently beat is Bournemouth. Bournemouth will be entertaining Arsenal in this game week. I mean, for Bournemouth, for some reason, every time I turn on a Bournemouth game, it seems to be an exciting game. The Leicester first half, not so much. But in recent weeks, it seems to be exciting. Semenyo seems to be playing absolutely insane football at the moment. And for Arsenal, I know they currently sit in third place. And maybe I'm just an Arsenal hater, and it doesn't help that my best friend is an Arsenal fan. So it makes it harder to say positive things about them just because of the banter that goes between the two of us. But I've not been super convinced with Arsenal at the moment. I know they've got, quite a few injuries, and not just injuries, but injuries to key players like Odegaard, who I think drives a lot of their creativity going forward. But Arsenal, they're not doing it for me this season. I think it's positive that they're still getting results despite not being at their best. As I said, I mean, they're 1 point behind Liverpool in first place. I've not been 100% convinced by Liverpool either. I think their defense is not as good as maybe the only conceding 2 goals suggest, but we'll get to them in a bit. But yeah, I think for Arsenal, it's just about continue getting results whilst we're not playing our greatest, and then we'll play ourselves into form. And this is a perfect game against a Bournemouth side that's probably going to ask them a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Bournemouth definitely will be asking them a lot of questions. I mean, like you said, Semenyo, wow. The football he's playing at the moment is just unbelievable. I think he's what is not their best player at the moment. In saying that, Christie's also had a decent few games as well for them. I think that they have the quality of players going forward to upset a team like Arsenal with their creativity and especially with their pace out wide. So I think it's going to be a very interesting game. And like you mentioned earlier, I think Arsenal are definitely feeling the fact that they don't have Odegaard and that creativity, passing balls forward and creating chances. They're lacking that creativity. And obviously, nothing against Jorginho. I think he's a quality player, but he's not an Odegaard. And I think they're feeling that massively. And then, I don't know, Arsenal, they seem to be getting, like you said, the results that they do keep winning. And like you said, they're only 1 point off of Liverpool. But I mean, at the same time, it's just been not convincing. It's not flowing as well as it did last season for them. But I mean, one thing that they definitely have going for them is Kai Havertz has hit some massive form for them. he seems to be rejuvenating his career under Arsenal. And good for him. Kudos to him. Hopefully Sterling starts to hit those strides too. But it's going to be an interesting game. That's for sure. But I think Arsenal will still keep that winning form going forward. I'm going for at least a 3-1 win Arsenal.
Arsenal fans will be happy with that, and hopefully for them the performance is as good as the scoreline would suggest. But I mean, in recent weeks, the 4-2 win against Leicester, the two goals came late. The 3-1 win against Southampton, the second and the third goal, obviously the third goal came late, but considering it's Southampton at home, I would say all of the goals came a lot later than Arsenal would have expected. They had the 2-2 draw with Man City, obviously went down to 10 men in that one, so you can give them a pass and give them credit for holding out as long as they did there. But the Tottenham game, I didn't think they were impressive in that one either, but end up winning it 1-0, and then they had that frustrating 1-1 draw against Brighton. So for me, it's not looked great, but hey, you don't need to look great this early into a season. You just need to be in the conversation for
which they
titles, and exactly which they are, and then they can work on their form a bit later on. I think the issues create, in terms of getting separation, maybe continue in this one. I'm going to go 2-1. I still think they edge it, because that's what they seem to do at the moment. But I think it will be slightly tougher for them and Bournemouth to cause them a little bit of problems. Let's move on to Wolves versus Man City. We mentioned Wolves being a surprising team in terms of all the wrong reasons, being 20th in the league. For Man City, I thought Fulham gave them some issues, maybe a lot more than people were expecting, especially at the Etihad. Are you giving Wolves a chance in this game? How do you see this one going?
To be fair, I mean, Wolves definitely have that fighting power, especially go through their midfield, and I think it will definitely be an interesting game. I think they could give Man City some issues, but at the same time, I feel like Fulham, the reason why they gave City issues is because of how well they play going forward and their creative, from the midfield going forward. And I think the problem with Wolves at the moment is they're just not finding those connections properly enough. And I think that's and they're not finishing off chances, obviously, but I think they're missing something within that team. And unless they don't, I know that you said they're playing a behind closed doors fixture, and until they've really found that niche going forward, I think City would still carve them open. I don't think they would have too much issues against the Wolves at the moment, at least.
Yeah, in terms of score predictions?
I'm going to go for 3-1 win to City.
3-1 to City. I'm going to go 3-0 to City. I think they do need to still give a statement win post Rodri's injury, and I think they're going to use this game to try and do that. I think they go and really try and shore up that transition defense, which if they don't shore up, I think could become a problem for them in tougher games coming forward. But yeah, I think their focus in this game is going to be shutting down transition threats from the other team, and then just being as clinical as they can, just to remind the league that they are still Man City, and obviously they're coming off of, depending on which newspaper you read, a victory against the Premier League in court. But I would urge people to. I'm not expecting people to go and read the judgment. I understand legal judgments are not for everyone in terms of reading. They can be quite long-winded at times, but go and listen to what both sides are saying. Let me say that, and then you'll get a clearer picture of who won, who didn't win. I think both sides had wins and both sides had losses in that case, but I won't go into that case for other reasons. But let's move on to Liverpool versus Chelsea. This game, Michaela, tends to be quite low scoring. We've seen in recent seasons them play in a Carabao Cup and an FA Cup where both went to penalties.
Yeah.
Again, the previous Carabao Cup game that they had ended up being a low scoring game there as well. big blow for Liverpool, though. Alisson Becker potentially out for the next 10 games. I know Keller has come in and done well at times, but how big an impact could that be heading into what is probably Liverpool's toughest spell of the season in terms of fixtures?
I think, listen, it will definitely play on the back of the minds of Liverpool defence, because obviously they want to know the person behind them is able to do those things to them and feel comfortable with having someone knowing that they will save if they make a bad mistake or if they have someone to rely on, And obviously they haven't really played, with the other keepers. So I think that Alisson would be quite a big loss for them. But in saying that, like you said, he has played games with you guys before and he has had decent run-outs. Obviously, the only problem is he hasn't played as many games as Alisson. So I think that could be a bit problematic. But I don't think that would cause you too many issues, if I'm being honest. I do think, though, even though you did mention that in previous meetings has been low-scoring games between the two of you, I don't think this game is going to be like that in the Premier League. I think with Chelsea, the way they're going on at the moment, I think it could be quite an interesting game and a high-scoring game from both teams.
Yeah, Chelsea have 16 goals this season. Liverpool have 13. Something has to come to a head here. Either Chelsea's highest scoring team in the Premier League and versus Liverpool's being the stingiest defense in the league. One of those records may well go this weekend. I think Liverpool probably would have conceded a lot more goals if they were playing tougher opponents. They have given teams some chances that probably get tucked away by better quality players, but I think maybe they're riding a wave that they could ride through the Chelsea game. They just can't afford to be sloppy because Chelsea will put chances away. We've seen this season, especially at a Brighton side that was trying to play out the back. Chelsea really punished them for being sloppy. I'm gonna go low scoring because they always are low scoring. I'm gonna go with a 1-1 draw in this one.
Oh, interesting. I'm going to go actually completely different to you. Listen, I think Mduke, am I saying his name right? Mduke?
Madueke.
Sorry, I do apologize. Not very good at pronouncing names.
Nah, that's okay.
But I think he's been absolutely massive for Chelsea. I think he's done really, really well for them. He's in great goal scoring form at the moment. So I think it's going to be a very interesting game for him and see how he handles it. I know that he did come with a slight knock last game, so it'll be interesting to see if he plays, but I think he will definitely play, especially after international break. I think Chelsea have a lot of chances to give it back at Liverpool, especially their defense and their unknowns to the keeper. So I'm going for at least a 3-2 win to Liverpool.
Oh, that would make for a very nervy game for me to be watching. But yeah, So we'll see. We'll see how that game goes. I've gone with form in terms of fixture form. It always tends to be low scoring. The weekend ends off with Nottingham Forest versus Crystal Palace. If you switch these two teams in the league table, that's probably where most people would have had them heading into the season, with Nottingham Forest in 18th and Crystal Palace in 10th. But no, the roles are reversed. Nottingham Forest are the team in 10th. Crystal Palace are in 18th. Can Crystal Palace kickstart their season against a very, very difficult to break down Nottingham Forest?
I mean, it's going to be a very interesting game. Crystal Palace, I still think they have the quality there. It's just they're not producing it. I mean, you got to think to yourself, as well as Nottingham Forest are doing at the moment, and I mean, kudos to them, they're playing some really good football. I mean, some very attacking and dangerous football. They seem to be controlling teams out of the game in certain games, and I mean, good for them. But you got to think that Crystal Palace with Eze and Nketiah, who I know is new to their team, they got to gel eventually. Their team's got to gel, and it's just it has to come to a head eventually. So I think this game will be a very interesting one in the sense that kind of expect Nottingham Forest to win purely because of how well they've been doing in the Premier League. And like you said, we all thought that Crystal Palace will be sitting in the position that Nottingham Forest is sitting in at the moment. We didn't expect this. And, don't get me wrong, Nottingham Forest themselves have been great, but I think Crystal Palace actually could win this.
Wow, that it would go with preseason form, but not with current form. I think Nuno has Nottingham Forest playing very disciplined football, looking to be opportunistic in attack. Chris Wood, another one of those senior strikers that seems to be rolling back the years this season.
Definitely.
It will be interesting to see what response Crystal Palace have after the international break. Hopefully not too many of their players end up going on international break and they can work on a couple of things during the next fortnight. But I'm going to lean with the informed team. I'm going to go with a 2-1 Nottingham Forest win, and it continues the woes for Crystal Palace. What scoreline did you have for this one?
I'm actually going for a 1-0 Crystal Palace. And you know why? I honestly think that Crystal Palace have a lot to prove. And I mean, I think also having international break for like the time that it is will give them a chance to really rethink things, especially in management perspective. And hopefully some players come back with a fresh ground of head, either if they play internationally or not. I just hope that kicks them on. And I think also Nottingham Forest, the more games they play through the season, I also think could also tire the legs out a bit as well. So I'd have to do agree with you. I think Nuno is doing great with Nottingham Forest. And I think he's playing really well in the sense that they're very more strict on certain aspects, but they take their chances and they know how to run forward with attack. So it'll be a very hard game to in sense of which one's going to win it, but I do think Crystal Palace might surprise a few people, especially after international break.
And if they can do that and restart their season, I think the Selhurst faithful would be very happy with that. I think, Crystal Palace are one of those teams where you look at them and you say that they can't be this bad all season. Like, it has to turn around at some point, and hopefully for them, I guess it's against Nottingham Forest. But Michaela, that is going to do it for another episode of A Tad Predictable. Do you have anything you want to plug, put over, or promote before we wrap up?
No, nothing. Maybe my Twitter page at Win News Man United. That would be great. But thank you so much for having me on. It's been great to speak all things football with you, especially with how exciting the Premier League season is shaping up to be. I think it's a lot more tight to the season, as you can see how close the top three are on the log, with Liverpool only needing away from Man City and Arsenal by a point. And also some teams that we didn't expect to be in positions that they are. I think it's going to be an exciting Premier League season. So I'm loving the way it's shaping up, and I can't wait to see where it takes us.
Definitely shaping up to be an exciting season, and we thank you for coming on to the show. Guys, from my end, go and check out all the content on EPL Index website. There are match previews, post-match reviews, player performances, all of the news that you guys could wish for. Of course, there's the daily podcast show, the Two Footer Podcast with Dave Hendrick, where he discusses the hottest topics in football. Finally, also go and check out the new flagship show that comes out on Sunday evenings. I don't think they have a show this weekend, or I guess you'll be listening to this after this weekend. There's a little breaking the fourth wall in terms of when we're recording this. But yeah, go and check out that show. They record. It's called the Final Whistle Podcast. They do the reviewing of the game week on Sunday evening, as I mentioned. We obviously do the previewing of the weekend. It's Nina and Ben, and sometimes they have a guest that comes on with them. Go and follow at EPL Index on Twitter. Subscribe to the EPL Index podcast channel on your podcast providers. Give us 5 stars. Write some positive comments. That stuff really does help us out, and we appreciate those of you that have done so. I've been Tadeo Chanakira. You can find me on the Twitter handle at TadPredicts. Huge thank you to Obi Semenya. He's at John Empire SA, our producer behind the glass. Mr. Guy Drinkle. He's at Guy Drinkle on Twitter. She's been Michaela, as she said, at Win Lose Man U on Twitter. That's Win Lose Man and then the letter U on Twitter. And remember, Chisinga Perry, Chinosho.
Salah, oh, sensational! Son had a go and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne! That is what Martinelli forward. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.